Good morning. Coming into booming. Yeah, Joe, thank you. So, welcome to the space, everybody, and welcome to Fantasy Island. I am your host. And we are going on a journey today, hopefully out of fantasy into reality. Also, welcome to everybody joining us in the virtual land of Facebook and YouTube. We're happy to have you in this space as well. And as we gather here on a Sunday morning, we're always in for a treat because we have this smorgasbord of wisdom traditions to play with. And that's really one of the beauties of being human is we have such an inheritance, such a grand heritage of contribution that has been given, bestowed over the centuries in the Eastern and Western teachings of awakening and spiritual liberation. And so we are going on a journey today. We're going on a journey to the far reaches of India and to the exotic land of ancient China. And as we prepare for this journey, instead of packing our bags, we want to leave our baggage, right? This is a journey of emptying out. This is something that's going to be really the theme of this morning. It's centered within the concept of liberating self, liberating world. And we're going to see how those two go together, that there is no world apart from yourself, and there's no self apart from your world. They are actually one and the same phenomenon. They actually mirror or feed back for one another. They are simultaneous. And so the self that you see is the world that you see. The world that you see is the self that you are. And so we're going to see that there are only two choices to be in this world. There are only two different ways of perceiving yourself. And you have a very different world that arises according to the self that you're choosing. And to keep in mind, too, that we are all coming in with a preconditioned choice right now. You've already chosen. You might not know that, but the choice was already made. In fact, when you were born, you were on a default setting of choice. So wherever you're looking out from right now, you're probably looking out from a separate self sense, an isolated individuality that is bounded by the skin and then sees a world apart from the subjective state of the internal self. And so everything is other than self. You're in here and everything and everyone else is out there. That is a default setting, and it's a choice that we didn't realize we made. So this is why the spiritual teachings of liberation are really having us come back to our origin. This is why it's leave your baggage at the door, because all of the baggage has been accumulated because of this faulty misperception. So as soon as you've made this choice, or since we've been born into a world on a default setting of being separate individuals, we are giving our own perspective to everything that is arising, and that perspective is we are separated from everything that is arising, which produces a fear state, because if you were to really feel into the emotion of fear, it's a contraction. It's a pulling away from. It's a splitting off from. It's a separating from. So fear is literally the emotion of separation. So every time you're looking at this moment separate from what is arising, you're in a fear state. You're in the emotion of fear. And so the world and the self are simultaneous. And so you're giving the world an emotion of fear. It can be decorated in a multitude of ways, but if it's separation at its core, whatever way you're choosing to decorate it, pleasurable, painful, neutral, good or bad, whatever value you're overlaying on that fear emotion, it's still only a fear emotion that's just been dressed up because separation is at its core. So there's a contraction in everything that we're experiencing when we're thinking of it only in terms of our separate self. And so the world shows up fearfully. It has to. It has to. And what we don't recognize in all of this is that we are magical beings. We haven't been conditioned to believe that, like we looked at last week, especially now that we've been born into the age of scientism, and the priesthood is now, the academic scientists and intellectuals of materialism. We have been conditioned, whether we know it or not, into thinking that our life isn't really worth that much, that we're just material, chemical beings, machines operating for a temporary time, and then we blip out. But in truth, as we see in these ancient traditions, we are magical beings, and we are dreaming the universe. And so what we're looking to do here is release, let go of these emotive states of fear so that we can actually dream another version of this universe. And because we're magical beings, all we actually have to do is let go of what's been blocking us from our own inner magic and allow that to flow through. And we will see through the teachings of Buddhism and Taoism this morning that it will become effortless to reimagine the world and to see it in its pristine purity and harmony and liberation. So that's our journey this morning. I hope you're up for that and ready to dive in. But as always, the diving in requires this relaxing. It's so key when we explore this type of a conversation that it's experiential and that you're no longer thinking of it in terms of acquiring knowledge from the outside to build up or improve your separate self, but rather the information that's coming is to open these psychological doorways within you so that you can tap into the wellspring of your own innate wisdom, that you'll find within you all of the knowledge, all of the power, all of the truth that you will ever need. You've already been gifted everything. It's this version of yourself that is based within scarcity, contraction, and fear that doesn't see that, doesn't believe that. But when you relax and release the fear and just let go, you'll come closer and closer to that inner radiance, which is your abundant life or Christ nature. So chill out, relax, take it easy. I'm sorry, a little Nacho Libre there. Just allow your breathing pattern to deepen and slow down, taking the breath all the way down into the lower belly, maybe even to the base of the spine. And as you exhale, allow all of that breath to expire out through the nostrils or mouth until you squeeze out all the stale air. keep filling and emptying in a slow, even pulse. And as we're saying that we are magical beings, miraculous entities, our breath is part of this hidden in plain sight magic. So keep your mind focused on the phenomenon of your breathing and discover its inner mystery, its hidden depths. And as the attention steadies on the flow of breath, the breath takes you into the shining present moment. And this radiant now, this instant, is completely empty of any concepts, anything to do with past or future. It shines like a pure diamond within your awareness and as your awareness. When you melt your attention fully into the pulse or flow of your breath, you are the present moment. Emptied of the actor or character that you play in the movie called separation. And as you can relax more and more into the shining brilliance of this present moment, the script that you used to read as the actor in the play of separation dissolves. And you open up these psychological doors, this gateless gate that takes you beyond thought and words into the heart of reality, your true home. And so we continue on our journey this morning, and whenever the thought of being the separate actor or a script from your part that you played in the separation movie comes up, release it, let it go. If it's the emotion of fear, just breathe into that feeling and keep relaxing it, letting it go, letting it dissolve, and just keep taking yourself back to the flow of your breath and the openness and peacefulness of this moment now. And so it is. So, what I'd like to share from first this morning is the Diamond Sutra. It's a Mahayana Buddhist text. Very powerful, pithy instructions that are given by the Buddha to his disciple Subhuti. And it's called in Sanskrit Vajrachadika, and that means the Diamond Cutter's Sutra. And the reason why it's the diamond cutter is, in a sense, it, like the diamond, is the hardest substance that can cut through anything. And so what it's showing us is that there's a part of our mind that has this very high level of discernment and clarity and indestructibleness, like a diamond. And when we pay attention to that and we identify as that, there is no illusion that can interfere with our reality. There's nothing that can arise within a world that can take us off of our peace in this present moment. It cannot eclipse or shatter or change who we are as this indestructible self that can see through all illusion. And that's what this teaching will do again and again and again in its 32 chapters. And so I'd like to share some of that with you this morning in keeping with this idea of liberating self, liberating world, and how the two are always together. And what we're going to suss out this morning is that this is all immediately grasped. Even if you can't hang on to it, there's going to be moments where it's going to flash as the possibility that it is. You will have that possibility get eclipsed again with the habit patterns of your believed self and your reality, so it's going to go away. You're going to turn back to the way that you think you are and the way you think everybody else is. But you keep getting these flashes, you keep feeding yourself on this truly divine food. Eventually it begins to take root more and more in your attention, in your desires, in your behaviors, and it becomes a tipping point eventually, where you begin to actually choose truth more than illusion. You're choosing liberation more than bondage. You're choosing light more than darkness. And you keep moving along that spectrum of development until you realize that there's really no choice. It's a choiceless choice. You're in the freedom of the now. And there was never really a self there to begin with. It was all a mirage. It was a hallucination. It was a really bad dream. And now you're awake. You're Buddha, which means awake. And what's interesting about this, we're going to see in the teaching of the Vajracchedika, is that the Buddha doesn't call himself the Buddha. Oftentimes, his number one epithet that he calls himself is Tathagata in Sanskrit. And it comes from a root tathata, which means suchness. And the way that you translate Tathagata is thus come, thus go. It's just this, you can't put your finger on it. You can't define it. You can't conceptualize it. So the Buddha, having awakened from the dream of being a false self, knows that his nature is beyond graspability. You can't grab hold of it. You can't define it and say, oh, that's what it is. It's like the chair. It's like that. It's like this. No, it's suchness itself. It's beyond graspability. That's why in early Buddhist art, the best portrayal of the Buddha for the first couple of centuries was empty space in the picture. There was no body there. You would see footprints maybe in some renditions. You would see an empty seat under a parasol that every other character was acting around. But there was no body there. Tathagata, suchness, gone beyond all name and form, and being his real nature, right, which is the totality, without limit. So that's what happens when you go through your stages of development. You let go of the constriction of being a character in the movie called Fear and Separation. And as you release that, like we saw last week with the Vimalakirti Sutra, the Buddha touches his toe to the ground and the whole world bursts into beauty. And you can actually see behind the appearances, there is the true nature of the world, which is divinity, brightness, and beauty, forever reflecting back your true nature in this real feedback system. And he tells his disciple in the Vimalakirti Sutra, you can't see this right now because you're overlaying your karma, your projections, your beliefs on this moment. And that's why this world looks the way it does. Nothing is happening from out there to you, you're actually blocking the divinity from showing up because you assume you're this constricted, separate identity. And as we relax, we begin to see something naturally arise that was there the whole time, but we were ignoring it. We were putting something else in place of it. So we're going to cut through all of that illusion, all of that belief that we are a separate actor, dreaming a fearful dream. So the real teaching of the Great Way, Buddha said, Subhuti, all the bodhisattva heroes, right, these enlightening beings that are coming into the world, should discipline their thoughts as follows. All living creatures of whatever class, born from eggs, from womb, from moisture, or from transformation, whether with form or without form, whether in a state of thinking or exempt from thought necessity, are wholly beyond all thought realms. All these are caused by me to attain unbounded liberation nirvana. Yet, when vast, uncountable, immeasurable numbers of beings have thus been liberated, verily, no being has been liberated. Why is this, Subhuti? It is because no bodhisattva who is a real bodhisattva cherishes the idea of an ego entity, a personality, a being, or a separated individuality. So in other words, you are liberated from the word go. You've been eternally liberated. So when you come back to yourself and wake up from the dream where you dreamt you weren't liberated, nothing really happens. It might look tragic and dramatic and traumatic in your dream, but when you wake up, where is all of that? It didn't really exist the way you were dreaming it. And so when we dream that we're separated in a world of struggle and suffering, and we awaken, we realize that we were never in that world. We were actually sleeping and dreaming that we were someplace else. When we wake up, we realize we've never left our source. You know, Jesus says this in A Course in Miracles, many of you know. You're at home, dreaming of exile. And it's because we're so gripped onto a personality, a separated individuality, an ego entity that has these needs and desires and drives that have us going out into a world trying to find this Buddha nature, really, the liberation, the joy, the pleasure, the freedom, the happiness that we think is out there. We're just being misdirected by this idea that we have about ourselves. So it's really, again, this trick of mind. And when we begin to find that this is where it's occurring, it's a psychological event, that the world is a psychological event, and the liberation of the world is a psychological event, then we're on to something. Then we can actually start to see where true power and true freedom is, and how we can recreate the world once we know how to direct our efforts. So then this is chapter 22 here. It cannot be said that anything is attainable. Then Subhuti asked Buddha, world-honored one, in the attainment of the consummation of incomparable enlightenment, did Buddha make no acquisition whatsoever? Buddha replied, just so, Subhuti. Through the consummation of incomparable enlightenment, I acquired not even the least thing. Wherefore it is called consummation of perfect enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a thing. You are not going to get enlightenment. Your true nature is enlightenment. This is what we were saying earlier. You have made a choice that you don't even know you made. You're looking out from the choice that you didn't even know you made, that you chose to be separate. And everything that has happened to you since birth has simply been this consistency with what you chose. You couldn't help but see the world as we see the world because you selected separation. Now, as this predisposed choice, you think now that you're not happy, you're not free, things aren't going the way that you would really want them to. So there must be something that I have to do, and then I have to go find and get in this world that it will be consistent with how I see myself. So that when I get it, then I'm happy. And what he's saying here is it's really taking it all back. You're not going to find anything out there in the world because you're dreaming it. It's your projection. You have to change your default setting. That's why we relax, because the default setting that we've been operating with is fear. Everything we look at is tinged and stained with fear. Like even the pleasure that we find in the world, is it going to stay or is it going to go? Is it going to do what I want it to do, or is it going to go away that's going to leave me feeling this fear and the loneliness again? This gnawing, aching need that is at the core of our identity is our identity. Enlightenment is letting go of that core fear of being the separate actor. When you realize that, you do that Nestea plunge. Freedom from myself. This idea of John was my thorn in the flesh. That's what was driving me mad. John could never find what John needed. It was never enough. It was never right. John is a black hole of need because John was made out of fear. And John is the belief that I am not eternally enlightened. So I cannot find my freedom and happiness as John. In fact, by letting go of my personality, my separated individuality, I find that I too look out from this moment, as they say in Zen, with the same eyeball as the Buddha. How could it be any different? The illusion of ego. Subhuti, what do you think? Let no one say the Tathagata cherishes the idea, I must liberate all living beings. Allow no such thought, Subhuti. Wherefore? Because in reality, there are no living beings to be liberated by the Tathagata. If there were living beings for the Tathagata to liberate, he would partake in the idea of selfhood, personality, ego entity, and separated individuality. Subhuti, though the common people accept egoity as real, the Tathagata declares that ego is not different from non-ego. Subhuti, those whom the Tathagata referred to as common people are not really common people. Such is merely a name. So, again, Jesus isn't coming on the clouds. The Buddha isn't going to, come as Maitreya in the physical flesh to liberate you from your chosen default setting. You have to find this for yourself because you are the Tathagata. You are the Buddha. You are what you're looking for. Right? And then once you've made this choice to wake up and to see yourself as you truly are, your world will reflect that back to you, as we'll see in just a few moments when we turn to A Course in Miracles. So finally here, the delusion of appearances. Subhuti, someone might fill innumerable worlds with the 7 treasures and give all away in gift of alms. But if any good man or any good woman awakens the thought of enlightenment and takes even only 4 lines from this discourse, reciting, using, receiving, retaining, and spreading them abroad, and explaining them for the benefit of others, it will be far more meritorious. Now, in what manner may he explain them to others? By detachment from appearances, abiding in real truth. So how do you broadcast this teaching? You're no longer beguiled by appearances. You've chosen to reset the setting of where you're looking out from in this moment. Instead of choosing separation, you're choosing to see this moment as totally unified. And you're in a state of unity with all living beings. Once you give rise to that intention, it's like an instant feedback that you'll get the information, the strength, the understanding, and the assistance to let that thought of enlightenment or bodhicitta come into your awareness brighter and clearer according to the intensity of your intention. And then you'll look out from this unified, awakened perception where there are no separate beings that need liberation. There are beings that are choosing to remain asleep and will liberate themselves when they realize the pain and suffering that they're causing themselves by ignoring their true inheritance. And by you showing up as this presence in the world, it actually gives them more access to that part of themselves that they've forgotten. And that's it. You reawaken in them their own inner connection to their spirit. This is why A Course in Miracles says you as the healer or teacher of God, you're not doing magic. You're not giving anybody anything they don't already have. There are no beings to liberate because we've been eternally gifted everything. We're just ignoring it. We're refusing to accept it. And we've developed an addiction to fear as our separate self-sense. And what I've recognized in myself and in teaching over the years is that even when people come to this work and they want to wake up, sometimes the teaching will shine a light on these little secret parts of ourselves that we're guarding and protecting and validating as real. It could be our likes or dislikes, our wounds or our hopes or whatever it may be. Just something that the separate self thinks it needs and needs to protect. When the teaching shines a light on that, you actually get to see your true character and what you really want. Oftentimes, for me personally, I want to defend and be right. Other students that I've seen over the years, they run away. They get so offended. Because what happens is the choice is again made. See, we're always making the choice. Do you want to wake up or do you want to stay asleep? Do you want to be in fear or love? And when the light comes onto these parts where we've been constricting and avoiding the light, our default setting is survival of the ego. We want to save the face of our ego, no matter what. So, oftentimes the light appears to come as the enemy because it's upsetting my identity. And so I'll take my identity away from this conversation. Thank you very much. And so this is why we have to realize that the choice is really, as Lisa likes to say, there's no wiggle room. You can't be partly awake and partly asleep. And the ego is going to say, yes, you can. Please listen to this BS that I'm trying to give you. You can stay your separate self and now go out and find enlightenment. Go get those books. Go to those courses. Go on those retreats. Just don't stop being your constricted, separate, acting identity. Just be the actor. But you can be the enlightened actor. And so many of us go in that broad path that leads to death. We keep listening to the Pied Piper of the ego. Narrow is the way that leads to life. Few find it because few are willing to give up their identity as they've known it. In keeping with the Buddhist path, we're going into something that came out of ancient China. When Buddhism came to China, it became, in one school, Chan Buddhism. And this is really a path of approach that's much like the Diamond Sutra. No BS. If it's illusion, you cut it away. And you realize that what's making the illusion is your discursive inner chatter in your thinking and talking to yourself. That's what's making the falsehood seem real. Your commentary on the present moment, your commentary on your life, your story about where you've come from, what everything means, this constant chattering and this meaning making that is going on at the linguistic level of thought. That's why to find enlightenment, we're thinking that enlightenment is going to be linguistically structured thought. No, enlightenment is the nest-he plunge. It's when you finally give up trying to find it conceptually. Don't get me wrong, concepts will help because these skillful concepts of the enlightened teaching turn you around, right? That's what we've been talking about. Repentance is you turn around. You stop looking out at the world thinking it's got something for you. And you start using concepts to undo concepts. Like the thorn to take out the thorn. Or soap, which is grease, to take off the dirt. But you rinse it off. You throw the other thorn away. Concepts will serve a purpose to break your addiction to conceptual thought, but eventually you have to take the plunge where your whole being goes back into the ocean. Not fear, the release of fear. So that's why in Chan Buddhism, they have these teaching methods called koans, and maybe you've heard of them. They're literally called case studies. They're events that supposedly happened between a Zen master or a Chan master and his disciple. And that's then a snapshot of a dialogue or exchange that the master shows what Zen is like. And so those who are following this method will see how to approach the teaching in order for this to become realized. And there's a collection, a famous collection of these koans or case studies called the Woman Quan. And this is a commentary on the Woman Quan by Guogu. And the first case study in this collection, and you probably heard this one, is a disciple goes to Joshu or Chochu and says, "Does a dog have Buddha nature?" And the master's answer is, in Chinese, "Wu." And so this is the answer of Buddha nature to this question. And so the Zen practitioner will take this onto the mat and deeply consider what this wu means. In Chinese, the word wu means no or nothing. And there are so many layers of deep insight that need to be unpacked in that exchange. Because what the master is saying is, he's not denying that the dog has Buddha nature. Every living being is Buddha nature. What he's also saying is that in the Chinese philosophy of that time, Wu was a technical term, and it literally meant the absolute reality, the great nothing, or absence of all limitation, all form. And so in this moment when Wu is spoken, it's being spoken from the absence. That's what the Zen master is. Like the Buddha, there's no body there. You as a practitioner get to a place where you realize there's no body there. Try this. Cut your head off right now. Look at this moment without your head, your face. Just feel headless for a moment. There's no body there. It is a discursive rattling on that we have going as our self-story. Zen or Chan, like the diamond cutter, cuts through that. Nothing. But you're not left with a vacuity or a deprivation. You take the nesty plunge back into the all. So you literally show up, you're arising as all being. Like they say in Sufism from the Quran, wherever you look, there's the face of Allah. This is the same realization. You start arising as all being. You go from constricted deprivation to in love with life because you are life. And you're united with the source that protects all life. You've never left it. You were just dreaming of exile. And the world has always showed this to you. But we've blocked it through this discursive, endless chatter of what we think everything is for. And there's a whole empire of illusion that is designed to give you more chatter, more conflict, more confusion, more fear. And it's there by your election. Because when you look out from the constricted separate actor, you will have a tyranny. That's what Jesus says. That you're either choosing true authority, which is the nesty plunge, and you're arising as all life, and you're intuitively one and unified with everything. Christ consciousness permeates everything. And love is just who you are. You don't have to go looking for it. Or you're choosing to look at the moment from the constricted self. And he says you go from true authority to tyranny. So when you're living your life as the constricted self, you're ignoring the true authority. And you must then be under the regime of the tyrant, within and without. And the trouble with us is we're so ignorant and cut off from what's really going on at an existential level that we are duping ourselves so thoroughly that we don't recognize how this is all really being played out, how we're imprisoning ourselves. So the cutting through is so necessary. Now, remember, when the light comes, there's going to be this part of you sometimes that might not feel all gushy and welcoming to it. That's when you have to say, woo. So this is Guo Gu's little comment here. Living life through your discursive thinking is actually not living at all. You project all of your own likes and dislikes onto the world around you. In doing so, you kill all opportunities and potentials. You live in your own world of having and lacking, of existence and non-existence. You live a fragmented life of contradictions. But if you are free from discriminating thinking, which is the fuel of your self-referentiality, you will be able to give life to all life. Did you get that? The discursive thinking, this constant inner chatter, is the fuel for your self-referentiality, your isolated ego identity. You feed it with your storytelling. Oh, this is good. Oh, I like that. This is not good. This is bad. This is going to be horrible. Oh my God, I can't believe they just said that to me. Do I really look that ugly? Am I losing my hair? We go through all of this contradiction. We're up 1 minute, down the next. Through our own inner chatter. We're literally under the regime of a tyrant who's dictating to us internally these ups and these downs and never letting us see the true, the loving, the beautiful. So he says, if you give up the fuel of self-referentiality, if you stop talking to yourself and see the moment as it is, let it talk to you. Get quiet. This is one of the ways that the world is going to change. The world of fear changes when you realize it's not about you. Everything we're looking at on this world stage it's being self-referenced to me and my story. When we give up that story and we stop trying to be the actor, we actually have a delightful time. And the world becomes our friend. And it feeds and takes care of us and comforts us and brings us peaceful things to look upon and see and beautiful people to interact with, right, Lee? So isn't this delightful? Isn't this worth practicing for? The good news is that this freedom is your inheritance. It is not gained from outside you. All that you need in order to practice is already here. Yes, that includes all of your vexations, challenges in life, self-referential thinking. These are the ingredients of the path. The way through the gate of Chan or Zen. Allow all of these to be wu, absence, God arising. What is wu? If you go through this gate, then you are free to live as you are on this shore of birth and death without changing your occupation or leaving your household life. You can roam and play in samadhi, in the midst of the 6 paths of rebirth. So this means that in all situations in life, nothing is separated. In all situations, nothing is separated. There is no self-referentiality anywhere. There are no beings to liberate. Because what you're seeing is your ego, your self-reference, your chatter about who this person is. You're making them an ego by the way you're looking out from this moment. Do you see this? It takes a while. It's so foreign to the way that we've been conditioned. So there is no self-referentiality anywhere. At such a time, life becomes a playground in which to exercise wisdom and compassion, not for self or others, but as a natural way to be. You then become that single spark that lights up all life. Otherwise, still living life in terms of having or lacking, you continue to harm yourself, whereby life is lost. So what a wonderful way to show up, by being nobody. Did you put your head back on yet? This is freedom from yourself. That's what this teaching is. The self that you keep talking to and that keeps talking in your head is your tyrant, your slave master, your torturer. And that self that you keep referring to as I, me, and mine is the one that's showing you the world of disaster and suffering and terror, inequality, pain, injustice. It's not coming from out there. Which brings us to our final stop. We'll touch on this. This is lesson 130 in A Course in Miracles. It's titled, "It is Impossible to See Two Worlds." Perception is consistent. What you see reflects your thinking, and your thinking but reflects your choice of what you want to see. Your values are determiners of this. For what you value, you must want to see, believing what you see is really there. Listen, no one can see a world his mind has not accorded value. And no one can fail to look upon what he believes he wants. So remember, this constricted self is made from fear. It needs fear to stay alive in your mind and talk to you as if it's you. So if you keep listening to that voice or teacher that tells you, look out from this fearful state, feeling the emotion of fear, you will see the world you want. You don't realize you're making this choice based on what you want. But when you look deeply, you'll realize you want to keep the separate self in place, which means you want the world the separate self is naturally aligned with, a world of suffering and fear, a world of separation. So you're always getting what you value and what you want. Yet who can really hate and love at once? Who can desire what he does not want to have reality? And who can choose to see a world of which he is afraid? Fear must make blind, for this its weapon is. That which you fear to see, you cannot see. This is a little iambic pentameter. Right? This is how the certain parts of A Course in Miracles were written in this Shakespearean cadence or verse. And we do have a Shakespearean villain in our midst. So how appropriate. Fear must make blind, for this its weapon is. That which you fear to see, you cannot see. Love and perception thus go hand in hand, but fear obscures in darkness what is there. So in other words, if you love your separate self, you will fear taking the Nestea plunge. If you love your life, you'll lose it, as Jesus says in the gospel. If you hate your life or you detach from your life, you'll find life. Like Guo just said, you're not living if you're lost in discursive thinking. You're not really alive. You're haunting the past or projecting a future. You're not here. You're not alive. That's why one of the great Chan masters, Lin Chi, used to look out at his disciples and say, "You're all ghosts." And we have a world that goes along with that. So listen to this now. Fear has made everything you think you see. All separation, all distinctions, and the multitude of differences you believe make up the world, they are not there. Love's enemy has made them up. Yet love can have no enemy, and so they have no cause, no being, and no consequence. They are literally nothing. Woo. Right? It is impossible to see two worlds which have no overlap of any kind. Seek for the one, and the other disappears. What would you learn today? What we learn today is more than just the lesson that you cannot see two worlds. It also teaches that the one you see is quite consistent from the point of view from which you see it. It is all a piece because it stems from one emotion and reflects its source in everything you see. So if you choose the separate self to look out from onto a world, you will see fear, injustice, inequality, pain, suffering, terror, loneliness, sadness. And your separate self will weep and not feel safe or want to rescue or feel a victim or hate the victimizers or however way you're going to set up that patterning. But that's the world you'll see, a world of fear. And it's caused by what we value, what we want. If we want the separate self, you have to take the package deal. What a deal. If you take the Nestea plunge and show up without a head, be nobody so that you can become everybody, you'll see your true face. You'll see the peace. You'll feel the release of your fear, and love will replace the hatred. And a world will be reborn. Blue bag's going to go around. So if anybody has any thoughts or questions, happy to hear you. John. Blessing the offering and the givers that gave it. We just are sending all of this the intention of love so that everyone may prosper and know their true freedom and true happiness. So it is. Amen. Okay, my friends, we'll just stand and close out. If you're joining us on Facebook, remember you could always donate to support our service. We greatly appreciate it. Just click the link below, and you can just make sure you select for the 8 a.m. service. Thank you kindly. So as we bring ourselves back to the immediacy of right now, we have a choice to be the one that is looking out from all eyes and intending only peace to be in the hearts and minds of all beings, or to choose something that doesn't feel just so and good and true. And so may we make sure that we are mindful of our choices as we move from this space and back out into our lives. May we remember that every moment is a choice. Everything that arises is going to ask us, who are we and what do we value? May we choose love and healing and forgiveness as the answer. And in that choice, we will know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful Sunday, everybody. Course in Miracles tomorrow night, 7:15. Come and be nobody with us.